You know what? Let's watch this one. Why was Egypt crucial for the Roman Empire? No shit, so funded. Thank you. Kings in general. Why was Egypt crucial for the Roman Empire? Interesting. Why was it?
The Roman Empire developed into one of the most prosperous, vibrant, and affluent civilizations of the ancient world. But what made it this way? Conquests and taxes are the stereotypical viewpoint. However, many of these were drains on the empire's resources rather than boons. As the costs of defending and maintaining territorial gains gradually increased throughout the 1st century BC, Augustus was forced to look for new sources of revenue. The new imperial regime found that in the ancient land of Egypt. Welcome to our video on Roman Egypt, its importance to the Roman Empire and its governance. This video is sponsored by Imperator Rome, the newest historical grand strategy game from Paradox Interactive. Build a glorious empire out of blood and marble. Take the reins of power over any of hundreds of ancient nations, including Rome and Carthage, as you slowly expand to dominate the classical Mediterranean, Europe, and India. Expand trade, build roads, and command armies on the most detailed map ever made for a Paradox game. But keep an eye
I've never played a civilization
on
like
your
game.
generals and governors. Some of them will increase their own power and plunge your land into civil war. Enjoy the panoply and majesty of the world of Caesar and Hannibal in Imperator Rome, coming April 25th. You can support our channel by buying the game via the link in the description.
Fair enough. Appropriate, you know, sponsorship.
Conquest in the Roman Republican period accelerated at the end of the 3rd century BC. It was often a profitable venture for legionaries and their commanders, who would often gain vast wealth in war loot. However, when a new province was conquered, it would serve as a drain on funds due to the necessary administrative and defensive costs. Beginning in the early 2nd century BC, Rome gradually began to expand into the eastern Mediterranean basin, encountering and annexing the economically prosperous, well-organized, and long-urbanized territories in the east. The conquests of Gnaeus Pompey in particular were a landmark moment. After finally defeating the Pontic kingdom in the Mithridatic Wars, Pompey turned the Anatolian territories of Bithynia, Cilicia, and Pontus itself into Roman provinces. Further east, he annexed Syria and accepted the Judean kingdom as a protectorate. These rapid territorial acquisitions raised the revenue of the Roman state from 200 million sesterces per annum to 340 million, a colossal increase in such a short time. However, during the late Republican period,
I was gonna say, like, I'm surprised that the strategy before didn't work because, you know, if you take over a country, you can also take over the resource. So I understand that they have to spend quite a bit of money to run the new country that they conquered, but also they also get all the potential like value of the country itself. Yeah.
Many Roman territories operated at a deficit, and only the recently acquired Anatolian territories.
Okay, so I guess fair enough. I guess the idea is that some of the territory they conquered were actually not very wealthy, so in the end it just doesn't work. They need to conquer more wealthy land. Fair enough.
Now part of the province called Asia, were able to send wealth back to Rome after paying their own costs. As Cicero stated, due to its multitude of exports, Asia is greatly superior to all other lands. As the Republic's political turmoil intensified, Mark Antony and Octavian divided the Roman state through the Treaty of Brundisium in 40 BC. While Octavian took the turbulent and unconsolidated western half, Antony, as the senior partner, took the wealthier east.
Which would
he
become
quickly
the
turned his gaze
Empire
onto Egypt and made an alliance with Cleopatra VII, a descendant of Alexander the Great's general Ptolemy. During this period, taxes were vastly increased in order to fund an expensive war against the Parthian Empire, which damaged Egyptian businesses and the economy. Moreover, Antony's regime neglected important aspects of Egypt's infrastructure, such as the canals necessary for both irrigation of crops and for transportation. The Battle of Actium in 31 BC saw the end of Ptolemaic Egypt and Antony's regime there. When Octavian conquered it in 30 BC, the neglected new province could only provide 40 million sesterces per annum. In comparison, Julius Caesar's recent conquest of the economically less developed Gallic province also provided 40 million, showing the mismanagement which had occurred under Antony and the often decadent and neglectful Ptolemaic dynasty as a whole. Even with the reduced Egyptian incomes now flowing into the empire's treasuries, the enlarged Roman state could not be maintained for long. In the hopes of finding additional methods of meeting their monetary needs, a conference between various imperial leaders was held. The best solution at first was an attempt to conquer and seize the incense-rich Sabaean kingdom, or to attack and plunder the Parthian Empire. When these invasions didn't happen for a variety of reasons, Augustus and his subordinates were forced to search for other sources of revenue.
Are we close to 3.0?
Despite the country's depleted and neglected status, the conquest of Egypt granted Augustus an enormous fortune initially, mainly from the capture of Ptolemaic treasures. The wealthiest people in their society had 2/3 of their wealth confiscated, and the Romans stole the plentiful religious offerings gathered by Cleopatra. Two distinct but connected events now occurred, which would result in a drastic rise in Roman prosperity, and they were directly linked to Egypt. The first was the way in which Augustus used this sudden dramatic influx.
And I'd really love, like, I'm still right now, like, I'm in the middle of watching the World War II series of Indian Idol and the Time Ghost Army. Basically, over the last few months, I've been going through the World War I and Between Two Wars series, which has been insane. I love the level of detail and everything. I wish there was, like, a series of video like that about Rome, like the entire history of Rome. That goes in as much detail, because I feel like most video, they cover like a specific subject, a specific king, emperor, a specific, like, battle or something. But I wish there was like something like the Time Ghost channels that go, literally as in depth. You also about Rome as well, yeah. And I know Rome is like literally like hundreds of years, so like I guess it's a lot to cover, but I don't know. Yeah, like a channel that go super in deep would be cool. Super in depth. I definitely watch it on my own time, like I've been doing with the World War I and II by the Time Ghost Army. I don't know. Like, it's very interesting. I feel like I've always seen random videos about Rome, so like bits and pieces, and in my head I have like literally no actual like a reference point of where anything happens. I just know a bunch of random events, and they might be hundreds of years apart, but to me they're kind of all close. So again, Rome is always interesting, the Roman Empire, but it's such a mess in my head of like, like I know bits and pieces, but probably not 90% of it.
Of wealth, which had flowed back to Rome in unprecedented quantities. He used it to supplement state spending, and more crucially, granted generous amounts to the Roman people.
Yeah, it's been a while.
In one of these payouts, the princeps gave gifts to the soldiers and 400 sesterces to each Roman citizen. As well as ensuring his popularity, this gift had a profound economic impact. A consumer boom began, which eventually led to the increasing of prices of saleable goods up to double their previous level, which began to attract many foreign merchants to the Eternal City. The second was the conquest of the Egyptian Red Sea ports and their accompanying sea lanes, which led to ancient India and beyond. Though Egypt had been neglected for over a century by the Ptolemaic rulers, Augustus would now begin to restore sound governance and vibrancy to the region. He used the Roman army, now famous for its construction work, as a massive labor force to rapidly restore the agricultural and...
The army are the one constructing? I mean, I guess if there's no one to fight, fair enough.
Transportation infrastructure, which had been allowed to decay by the Ptolemies. Roads and trade routes were improved. Caravan stations were constructed, and military outposts as well as watchtowers were erected to facilitate and take control of communication and trade.
Very nice.
Making routes safe for traders was crucial, as more would travel if they felt secure in their safety and property. Crucially, the main advancements in this aspect of governance were accomplished in a concentrated area between the Nile port city of Koptos and its closest Red Sea ports, primarily Myos Hormos. Strabo reported that cisterns filled with plentiful rainwater were constructed at regular intervals, which aided traveling merchants.
That's smart.
Additionally, the Romans moved in to utilize the ancient gold and emerald mines of the eastern desert of Egypt, as well as the decorative porphyry and granite quarries of Mons Porphyrites and Mons Claudanius. The early Ptolemaic kings had also developed a competent administration, which was revitalized and added onto by Augustus in order to efficiently deal with the vast quantities of grain and wealth which flowed through the province. After only a few years of good Roman administration, the number of ships sailing from Egypt to India per year had increased from less than 20 to over 120, and this began to provide important new revenues derived from import and export taxes. A document known as the Masurus Papyrus confirms how Roman customs agents taxed the lucrative eastern cargo. For example, a ship named the Hermopollon returned from India carrying a staggering 9 million sesterces worth of goods, primarily exotic eastern pepper and spices. State officials supposedly collected around 2.2 million sesterces as a 25% tax from this one ship.
That is
Therefore,
crazy.
all 120 ships could have brought in 250 million sesterces in import taxes.
Wow.
As they traveled to Rome and to their newly wealthy buyers, the imports were likely taxed again by the 1/40th Mediterranean Pretoria, which likely totaled around 25 million sesterces per annum. Another 25 million was collected by the state as Roman exports such as cereals, wine, and olive oil being shipped to India were taxed on their exit.
Infinite money glitch.
Therefore, by 20 BC, Augustus was receiving from Egypt an income larger than that received by King Ptolemy XII in 80 BC, and it is likely that the province provided up to half the income needed to finance the whole empire.
Wow.
The prosperity that this trade brought merchants is shown in an incident which occurred late in the life of Augustus. Tacitus tells us that as the emperor's ship was passing by the Bay of Puteoli, an Alexandrian merchant freighter approached. The ship's merchant crew and passengers, donning white garments and dressed in garlands, began burning celebratory incense. They lavished good wishes and praise on the emperor, stating gratefully that he and his reforms had given them their livelihood.
That's
the
nice.
aging Augustus watched with pleasure
nice.
and gave 40 gold pieces to each of the ship's soldiers, provided they all swore to spend the gift on Eastern goods from Alexandria. By the mid-1st century AD, Egypt was producing staggering revenues of around 600 million sesterces,
600.
or
Then we went from like, what was it? 250 million? And now Egypt alone is 600 million. Holy shit.
2/3 of imperial revenues per
Infinite money
year,
glitch.
highlighting its importance to the Roman economy and massive potential when administered correctly. The growth of Eastern trade explains how the empire received such a massive sudden boost to its revenues in the reign of Tiberius. When that emperor perished, the imperial treasury reportedly had 2.7 billion sesterces of surplus. This prosperity seems to have been unexpected, as during the reign of Augustus, he had advised his potential successors not to undertake further conquests, as the empire at that time could not support the additional costs. However, due to the monumental revenues generated by Egypt, it became possible to embark on more ambitious endeavors.
At what point are you like, man, maybe we have enough territory? Like, at what point are you not just done? Like, I don't know. You're making so much freaking money. Like, why do you want to keep like conquering other territory? I guess I never really thought about it, but was the Roman Empire's goal literally like world domination or something? Because at that point, yeah, like you are banking it to the max. Your people seem to be living great for the most part. I don't know if the empire is making so much money. So just invest the money in, you know, your country, your empire.
By the year 43 AD, Claudius could afford to undertake the conquest of Britannia, adding another deficit region to the imperial domain.
Deficit region.
This annexation also sacrificed the acquisition of trading tariffs, which were more prosperous than the possession of the area itself. The last Flavian
So yeah, it's literally just to be like, yeah, I rule the world, I guess.
Emperor Domitian also raised army pay by a third
Not
in
for
the
the
late
Jeep.
1st century AD in order to cement his popularity with the soldiers, increasing military spending by 200 million sesterces per year.
Oof.
Both of these fiscally negative moves would have been impossible without Egypt. With its fertility, massively prosperous eastern trade, and low military costs, the now well-administered Roman Egypt essentially bankrolled the rest of the empire, propping up its deficit provinces and allowing for further expansion. During this early period of the empire, control over Egypt meant consequent control over the vast majority of imperial revenue and possession of a third of Rome's crucial grain supply intended for the Annona grain dole. We must take a moment to discuss the importance of this underestimated economic phenomena. During the late Republic, socio-economic conditions in Rome, the growing population and political unrest caused senators to enact the grain dole in order to secure popular support among the citizens. The Roman poet Juvenal derisively coined the phrase bread and circuses to describe both the grain dole and the entertainments Romans were supposedly preoccupied with during this time. However, there was an economic incentive to subsidizing the population which is rarely outlined. Low-income citizens, instead of having to spend all their surplus money on bread, could now afford luxury goods purchased from the increasingly vibrant markets of Rome, which encouraged trade even further. In essence, the Roman state had indirectly fostered market commerce by allowing their citizens to maintain their surplus income for luxury spending.
So everything sounds like this time of history might have been one of the, at least if you're in the Roman Empire, might have been one of the best time of history. Like, seems like there was no crazy war, well, maybe some conquests, but I don't know if they were pretty hardcore. Actually, I think I've heard that the, like, invasion of Britannia was pretty hardcore. But yeah, otherwise, if you're in the empire itself, seems like you're living the good life. Huh?
Furthermore, the grain dole allowed for Rome to become one of the most massive urban areas of the ancient world, reaching up to 1 million people. At the time of Rome's peak population, its nearest rival was the city of Luoyang in Han China, with a population of 500,000.
Of course.
To recap, Egypt provided both massive revenues and massive quantities of the grain necessary to maintain Rome's integrity. Now we shall discuss how the Roman emperors managed this unique province. Aware of the economic potential of Egypt and its importance to the imperial structure, the emperors realized that access to the province needed to be limited. It could not be afforded for any aristocratic challenger or native separatist movement to originate in the province, as it would severely disturb imperial finances and possibly cause food shortages. To this end, Egypt was governed in a manner unlike any other province, with measures which shall now be discussed. Shortly after Augustus consolidated the empire, he split it into senatorial and imperial provinces. Senatorial provinces, or provinces of the Roman people, were those territories where the Senate had the authority to appoint the proconsular governor, and were also less threatened regions which possessed fewer legions. Conversely, the governors of imperial provinces were appointed solely by the emperors as legatus Augusti. Imperial provinces usually possessed vastly more military force, due to the risk that senators might attempt a coup against the emperor.
Makes sense,
Egypt was an imperial province, but it was subject to even more restrictions. Its governor was always a member of the equestrian class, equestrian praefectus, rather than a senator. In addition, no senator was permitted to visit Egypt without...
So, does it mean like more of an army person, which are much more loyal to the emperor, and less ready to do backstab?
The direct approval of the emperor, and therefore could not own property or conspire to use the province to rebel. Moreover, no Alexandrian was permitted to become a Roman senator, and the leading citizens were forbidden from assembling any native administrative council. Egypt was the gateway to the vast and untapped riches of the East, which, when exploited through international trade, granted Rome an unprecedented level of wealth and prosperity. The Greek author Dio Chrysostom outlined that, fundamentally,
Oh, this looks very familiar, like where I used to live in the south of France. There was a lot of ruins like this. Well, you know, ancient ancient ruins, yeah, of the Roman Empire. Like there was one I especially remember, yeah. There was a medieval castle which was like a kilometer or two from basically Roman ruins, and they were very close to each other, which is pretty funny when you think about it, yeah. Like two big pieces of civilization next to each other like that.
Roman control of Egypt altered Mediterranean commerce, and Alexandria became the greatest emporium in the inhabited world. What were the many commodities, products, and routes through which they travelled? What other kingdoms partook in this ancient globalized trade network? We're planning to make more videos on the Roman economy, so make sure you are subscribed to our channel and have pressed the bell button. We would like to express our gratitude to our Patreon supporters.
Okay, very interesting video. I mean, it's one of those things where, like, it's such a meme, people being obsessed with the Roman Empire to this day, right? But yeah, it's always such an interesting topic. I mean, you tend to think that, in this time of history and the ancient world, I don't know if that counts as ancient world, but, they'd be, for the most part, like the broad strokes of what happened, not the details to this extent about how the economy worked and everything. But I guess that's why the Roman Empire is so, like, it's old, but it's so still revered because we know so much about it and there's so much interesting about it, I guess. So yeah, great video. Great video. Here's the link. As I said, one day I'd love to see like a YouTube series, even if it's hundreds of episodes, but a YouTube series that goes in depth about literally everything. Because there'll be channels that cover the wars, the battles, some that cover a bit of the economy. But again, as a lazy person, I don't like watching multiple channels. That's why I really love the World War One, World War Two series by Time Ghost that cover like every aspect from the important people to the social, economic, the war, etc., like aspect of everything. And so you really get like a full, in one place, kind of recap of everything, basically. Super interesting. I don't know. Maybe there's already a series like that. If any of you know about it, tell me. Okay, I pasted the wrong thing. Okay. Alright, good video. Good video.